friends who I adore very deeply. Just before that, let me just round you up a little bit of what's going on. So with the pandemic that's hit us all, obviously there's some benefits, but there's also some troubles that come along with that. And many of you are working from home or furloughed at home and with our kids, but we need some motivation of how to try and get the best out of the situation. And today we have, for our launch event, we have Dr. Chetna Kang, who's a consultant psychiatrist. She comes from the Nightingale Hospital and combines over 2 decades of her experience as a medical doctor and practitioner and teacher of Bhakti Yoga to help individuals live a purposeful and productive life. She has worked with thousands of people, including celebrities, politicians, and corporate organizations, and regularly broadcasts for the BBC with over 200 million listens. So she definitely knows what she's talking about, chaps. I looked up something about family wellness, and I came across a quote that I thought was very pertinent to start our discussion. That health is a state of the body. Everyone's working out, everyone's trying to get their vitamin D and look after their body. But wellness is slightly different and more subtle. Wellness is a state of the being. So what is the difference? And we can hear from a professional doctor who can help us, enlighten us, and inspire us to get deeper into making our family well. So obviously we can't see all of you, but with our hearts, we give you a round of applause, Dr. Kang, and the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So welcome, everybody. I'm so happy that you're joining us this afternoon, and a really interesting topic, family well-being. So as Kush said, you know, there's so much talk about individual well-being. We're all revisiting our sleep, our physical health, our mental health. We're trying to manage financial challenges, and perhaps some of us are even struggling with, you know, losing members of our family to COVID. We may also be receiving the blessings of inviting new members of our family, or new members to our family through COVID. But, you know, families come in all shapes and sizes. And if you're joining us today, then you are clearly interested in finding out how we can impact and influence the wellness, the state of our family, not just now, but what I hope to share with you will help you even when we come out of the other side, when lockdown's over, when the COVID situation is behind us. Because even after COVID, we will all still be part of families. So, you know, as I said, we come, you know, our families come in all different types of shapes and sizes. They change through time. We were all part of a certain type of family structure when we were growing up, and perhaps our family structure looks a little bit different to what we were used to growing up. But family has such a huge, important impact. I think we forget the effect our little microcosm, little micro community at home has on the rest of society. And our families are literally the microcosm of microcosm and building blocks of society in general. And within each family, every relationship is a microcosm or building block for that family, however many people are in your household or in your extended household. So why is it? What is the huge impact, and why is it so significant? Because wherever we go, whatever we do, we take our home with us. That's the people who are at home with us, the patterns we've picked up at home, the stresses, or even the rejuvenation we get at home goes with us everywhere we go, whether we're studying, whether we are working, it doesn't matter. Whether even we're trying to go for a break, we carry it with us, what we were brought up with and what we have currently going on in our families. So don't underestimate the power of your family, the power of you as an individual in impacting your family, but also the effect your family has on your local community and the effect that that community has on society. Because, you know, everything and everyone is a product of all of these things. You know, just as our parents did for us, we also do for our children. we have a profound effect on them, even when we think we're not affecting them. Now, often in my work, what I'll see, a huge area of my work is focusing on a client or patient's past history, their personal history, what their relationships were like growing up, what their relationships were like with their siblings, with their parents, the kind of activities they did, what their emotional expression was like. And as parents, we have a huge influence. And by influence, this is actually a really powerful concept. It's not there to frighten us or to make us worried. But the reason I'm mentioning it is influence. It means that we have control over it. So we have influence on how our spouses, and particularly our children or other extended members of the family, anybody, and particularly the young ones, are developing their sense of who they are. They also learn from us how two people in a relationship relate to each other, both in terms of how they speak to each other, how they run the household, how they place importance on things, how they prioritize things in life. You know, where is the priority placed? Is it placed on physical health, emotional well-being, on the family as a unit? Are there spiritual values there? So we often, you know, as we're growing up, and our kids also learn from us, how the two people who are running this household, or 3 people, or 5 people, however many people are running the household, how do they relate to each other? Okay, so this is a really important and valuable input that we have as parents into our families. The other way as parents we really influence our children is they also understand from us who they are, not just in the house, but in the world. Okay, so many of us have picked up our sense of self-identity, our sense of self-worth, our sense of purpose, our sense of value, our sense of identifying ideas around success and failure, ideas around happiness and distress, have been picked up from our parents. So we have an impact on that side also. We also learn from our parents, and our children learn from us how to deal with authority. Now, you know, like I said earlier, we carry our homes with us. We carry our families with us wherever we go. And often as we've gotten older, we may have noticed that some of the patterns we have, relationship patterns we have at home, we also take into our workspace. Equally, our children will also carry those things. So the reason I'm going into this a little bit more is because I think as we spend more time in any relationship, as we spend more time with people, it breeds familiarity. We start to take things for granted. We get caught up in the busyness and routine and trying to make things happen rather than focusing on how they're happening and why we're doing those things. So what I'd like to share with you is, you know, just some strategies to help us to self-reflect in the pursuit of family wellness, but also some tools to build on what we already have, because it's never too late to start. And it's also never too soon to start, even if you feel like you're in a good place. So, you know, with all this struggle, you know, it sounds like quite a tough job, tough gig to be a parent, doesn't it? I mean, I think most of us would agree that we didn't really know what our parents did for us until we became parents. And it didn't come with a manual. And maybe as a youngster, as a teenager, I remember not being so grateful for what my parents did. I used to get annoyed if they were constantly checking up on me, or would get fried out if I didn't call them, if I was out or I was an hour late with my call. I just couldn't understand their anxiety. I couldn't really appreciate until I became a mother myself what it means to raise a family, how so much of what we put into our families is unnoticed by the rest of the family. And I actually think it's a beautiful thing because it allows us to become selfless. It allows us to really understand what the important things in life are and how to have healthy, selfless, loving relationships. You know, families can be a real opportunity to grow. So why do we keep, you know, this cycle of family going, knowing that actually we have such a profound impact on the future of another person and the future of society? Because we like to share our lives with others. And what we know about the best relationships and the best teams is that they have a shared purpose but also have shared experiences that nourish that purpose. So I'd like you to all kind of have a think about, in our families, are we simply sharing the same space, or are we also continuing to share purpose and experiences in the pursuit of that purpose? How our families look and how they live change as we change, as kids get older, as everybody's needs change. You know, life changes. But throughout life changing, within all of us, there is a witness. Within all of us, there is that essence within ourselves, which observes all of this. And we often forget that side of ourselves. And that's the place from which ultimately our purpose comes from. And ultimately, that's where we rejoice, take joy, and actually connect to each other from through this human wireless network. You know, we have a deep, deep connection, an unsaid connection, which is strengthened by shared purpose and shared experiences. So I'd like you to reflect on something. Just take a couple of moments. And one of the good and best places to start in terms of looking at wellness in any state, and particularly with family wellness now, is why did you start a family in the first place? Just think back. For you as an individual, if you want to do this exercise with your spouse, do so. Otherwise, as an individual, why did you start a family? What made you decide to start a family? What was your purpose? What were you hoping it would fulfill in your life? And if you have a pen and paper, these exercises will be more powerful, because as you write things down, more and more things will unlock and more things will be revealed to you. So just reflect for a few moments on why you started a family. And as you're reflecting on why you started a family, from when you started to now, maybe months have passed, maybe years have passed, does that purpose still hold true? Is it something that your partner and your children are aware of? Is it something you're still aware of and connecting with? And is it still the same? And if it's something different, what keeps you going? What's the purpose of the family now? You know, perhaps you've had deeper realizations and understanding about the purpose of family now. Perhaps your reasons for starting were different to your reasons now. So reflect on those. Jot down just 2 or 3 things for your purpose for having a family and why family wellness is important to you, because it is important to you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be on this, joining us for this session. So you have an invested interest. There is some reason that you would like to look at the wellness of your family. And try not to come at this from a position of, I'm trying to fix a problem. Because yes, we can approach a lot of things as a problem-solving exercise, and wellness can also be a problem-solving exercise, but that's not the optimum way to approach it. You know, I often say to my patients that, you know, health is not just the absence of disease. Wellness is not just the absence of problems. Okay, there is an optimum. So even when there aren't problems apparent or health issues apparent, or there doesn't seem to be any dysfunction apparent, are we making the most of what we have? So if you've taken a few moments to reflect on that, I want you to now go back a little earlier to your past. We all have a baseline from which we're going to be starting these suggestions from that I'm going to make today, okay, in different areas of our life. The wellness of your family may be struggling because of health reasons, financial reasons. Perhaps you've got teenagers who are changing and it used to be so easy to communicate with them and now it's become difficult and you're tearing your hair out wondering, my gosh, when did parenting become so difficult? It could be a number of reasons you've come to this. But what I'd like you to do is think back, because we all start from a different place in different areas. We've all got, and I'd like all of us to kind of be on the same page in terms of, for yourself, identify where you're coming from. And perhaps this next question will help you with that. Because there are some things you all do as parents which you do well without thinking twice about it. And there are some things you struggle with no matter how much you come back to it. Okay, so this is now dig into your past a little bit. Think about your own childhood. Okay, and relate it to how you run your household now, how you engage with your family now. I would like you to identify one really positive experience from or habit that has shaped you and shaped the way you parent or run your family, or something you bring, you as an individual, even if you're doing this exercise with your spouse, you as an individual bring to your family from your own experience of being raised, that you know makes a positive contribution to the family environment and to your family's wellness. Just one thing. It could be anything. It could be that you were raised with a strong routine. It could be that you were raised with politeness. It could be that you have a really powerful experience of having fun times with your parents. You know, whatever it is, perhaps you have deep spiritual experiences from your childhood, which you now have brought into your family. You find it easy to bring in that you are the spiritual bedrock for your family. So whatever it is, identify something positive from your early experiences, which you contribute to your family in a positive way right now. It should come quite easily, okay? And the next one is also, let's identify a vulnerability, something that you know perhaps you didn't get enough of or received in a way which wasn't helpful, which you bring into your family also, which you've noticed perhaps isn't so good for the wellness of the family. And it could be the inverse of what I've just mentioned. It could be perhaps the way you communicated when you were growing up. Perhaps there were some unhealthy patterns with that. Identify that unhealthy pattern that you automatically find yourself bringing into your household. I mean, if I share one of mine is, you know, I don't know if this is an Indian household thing, but growing up, we had a habit of our parents would always call us from the other side of the house, rather than coming into the room and speaking to us directly, unless it was to get told off. And I've noticed myself, I've caught myself, and it's something I have to consciously try not to do, is I will catch myself calling my daughter from upstairs when I could very easily come downstairs. And this can unnecessarily lead to miscommunication, because how well can we hear someone who's on the other side of the house? And we also have to raise our voice. So it could even be something simple like that. You know, if I look at something positive, is my parents and I always, especially with my mum, I could talk to my mum about anything. And so it's also very easy for me to talk to my daughter about anything. So have a look at it this way. So one thing that you bring in that's positive has a positive impact on your family. It comes easy to you, and something that you struggle with. Now, I was talking about family wellness and how families are like teams, microcosms, like a base unit for society, and individual relationships within a family are the base unit for each family. And so far, it's probably felt a little bit like, my gosh, as a parent, I've got so much impact on my child. And, you know, I know as a parent, we beat ourselves up with so much guilt, almost having a lot of knowledge about how everything we do has an impact on the children that we're raising, can make us a little nervous about parenting, can push us into beating ourselves up about every little thing we do. And especially with modern parenting, you know, we can find ourselves almost second guessing ourselves and overthinking things so much that we swing between being excessively lenient and excessively boundaried, right? But I think one thing that's reassuring is when we talk about this team, this family team, however big or small your team is, it's a team. That means our kids also have an impact on us, right? We have this idea of collective consciousness or collective attitude. What is the collective attitude of the household? It's not just you as parents who have an impact on that. Kids also have an impact on that. And healthy kids, healthy families, well families, children are consciously aware of the impact they have on the rest of the family. Okay, you know, we just have to go outside to notice that when we are, even if we're not speaking to anybody, we can pick up on the subtle fear and anxiety that society has with everything that's going on with COVID, especially if you're in a densely populated area, for example, in one of the cities, or around the world anyway, if you're tuning in from across the globe. So we have sensitivity to this collective atmosphere, collective consciousness. The same goes for a household. You know, if I asked you to describe your household growing up, the atmosphere in your household growing up in one word, you probably could sum it up. You know, some people have described their household as at times it was just very sad. Other times it was very happy and joyful and nourishing. So, you know, that collective consciousness in the house is not just driven by parents. The children have an impact on that too. In fact, every person who lives in that household has an impact, whether you have extended family living with you, whether you have tenants. So there's a collective consciousness in the household. But when children have some awareness that you know that they have an impact on the family and they know they have an impact on the family, then it actually takes a lot of the burden off us and makes it easier for us to focus on family wellness. So I'd like to share a tool now. Enough with the questions. Those questions are kind of starter questions to get you warmed up, to kind of identify where it is you would like to, you know, focus on your family wellness, and perhaps some areas that work well and don't work well for you. So a tool I'd like to share with you is something that is used a lot in the workplace and also used a lot in therapy. We use this when families are struggling to communicate. But actually, a lot of the tools that are used in the workplace and are used in therapy actually work really well, even when we're in a state of wellness or things haven't quite got to the point where you need objective support. And what I'm suggesting here is actually that we're introducing the concept of family meetings. Now, this isn't to introduce a concept of a very business-like approach or something which is regimented and people feel is an austerity to do. It should be something that can be organically introduced. What is a family meeting? Just like in the workplace, just like in the therapeutic environment, a family meeting is an opportunity for everybody within that microcosm, within that unit, to get together. And when I say everybody, I mean everybody, even if you have toddlers, to get together and revisit the purposes that we have as a shared unit, okay, as shared individuals, a shared purpose, and which shared experiences we want to have to fuel that purpose. It's also an opportunity to visit individual purposes and how they fit into that purpose. So family meetings have many, many ways they can be run, but I'm going to share with you some ideas on how they can run effectively, but also the effect that good, healthy, regular family meetings have on our family wellness. You know, I often say to, you know, people will often say, oh, I never see my GP or I never see my doctor or my psychiatrist, only when I'm ill. But actually, it's good to check in with people even when things are going well, right? Because remember, nobody gets sick overnight. If your family wellness or family health is not in a good place, it didn't happen overnight. But again, like I said, it's never too late and never too soon to start. So this idea of family meeting is really an opportunity for the family to come together, communicate when emotions aren't heightened. And one thing that helps with family meetings, the first thing is deciding, first of all, when it's going to take place and where. Okay, you may want to identify somewhere in your household which is neutral or communal for the entire family. Okay, and when, find a time in the week which works for all the family members. Okay, now try to, if you can, not change this week to week. I appreciate everybody's schedules and timetables and families are different, but this works really well if there's a fixed time and day and space every week. Because what ends up happening is as you start to get into the rhythm of it, it becomes natural for you to use that space and time. It becomes habitual to use that space and time for healthy communication, for family time, okay, for addressing how are we going to change this microcosm, this collective consciousness in our household, so we all as individuals are functioning better. Okay, and then what we take outside with us when we leave the house is also we're having a positive influence on the rest of the planet. So identifying where and when is really important, because what happens is, you know, by committing to a where and when, if it's in the diary, it's in the diary. There should be a kind of level of commitment where, to, you know, just the same way when you wake up, going to brush your teeth is so automatic. You always do it in the same room, in the same way, at a similar time. Why? You don't put it in your diary. It just happens. So family meetings can have that kind of a profound impact if you give it the when and where from the get-go. Okay, and even the way we communicate in the family meeting will start to become so habitual that you will start to communicate in a healthier way even once the family meeting is over. So when and where is really important. Set up some ground rules. So these ground rules can address essentially the way you're going to communicate. Okay, so no interruptions. Have some sort of system in place where, depending on the ages of the people in the household, there's an effective way to indicate that you're ready to speak. Now, I appreciate with very small children, this isn't going to work, but with very small children, they're going to be led by parents and waiting to be invited to speak, okay, or say, or indicate, or gesture, even if it's just a nod, okay? Generally, family meetings work very well if there's an agenda. Now, this agenda can be put in a central place, maybe the kitchen fridge. You might want to put a list on the magnet for each week, have an agenda. And things that can go on the agenda can be celebrations, can be issues you want to resolve, it can be anything. And it's a free-for-all in the sense that every member of the household should feel comfortable adding to that agenda. So an agenda is really, really important, and it's really useful. One of the reasons it's useful is often much of our family issues arise because we have said or done something in the heat of the moment, because we're stressed or worried or angry. And in the heat of the moment, we may say or do things which then the consequences of which just cause us more problems. So what having an agenda does is, you know, we all hear this idea of actually stop, take a deep breath, think 3 times, you know, and before you speak. However, that's not always easy to do. And we all have different personalities. Some are going to be more attuned to that than others. So what the agenda does is if there's something that's really bothering you, it can go on the agenda. And then when we have the family meeting, what it means is that emotions have died down and it can be addressed much more objectively. And with the ground rules in place around a communication, it makes it much easier to have a healthy conversation about a difficult subject. Okay, so when and where, try and fix that same time. Ground rules, an agenda. And then when it comes to the meeting itself, it's really helpful to, before you even get into the agenda, start with compliments. You know, this is a really healthy way for us to get into a positive mindset from the beginning of the meeting, rather than seeing it as a problem-solving exercise. It also helps children with their self-esteem. Okay, it helps all the household members with their self-esteem. And it validates us and it encourages people to participate. So start off, first of all, with compliments and celebrations, and try to be something sincere and meaningful. You know, it doesn't have to be a huge, massive success or brilliant grades or a promotion or anything like that. Just even something simple, like, I really appreciated how you tidied the room. Or thank you so much for, you know, the nice meal you cooked yesterday. Just even a small thank you like that. It doesn't have to be a massive thing, but a little bit of gratitude has a profound effect on bonding and relationship building. Okay, so based on your agenda, based on your ground rules and the compliments, what you'll probably find is you will get some action points. Okay, now without micromanaging, you know, the situation, the rest of how the family meeting goes depends largely on what's on your agenda and how communication has gone. I would say when you start your family meetings, try and have them shorter in terms of time as you get used to spending that time together. And one other thing which works really well, again, you might recognize this from work, is have an activity. At the end of the family meeting, have an activity which is considered part of the family meeting, which is fun. It doesn't have to be, again, a long time. It just breaks the tension, the ice, and also creates strong, firm relationships. So family meetings are really good for us. They're really good for the children. They teach the kids how to communicate, teaches the kids positive psychology, develops their self-esteem, helps them to grow up into even teenagers who know how to speak to to their parents, and also helps us as parents to trust our children because our children are open with us. Also helps us to have less anxiety about where the family is at, what everybody's doing. And it can have a profound impact on our relationship with our partners. So there's been quite a lot there. And I'm ready for your questions when you are. I think, Kush, you're going to communicate questions from YouTube to me.
Hey, thank you so much, Chetna.
You're very welcome.
I'm a parent. I've got a 5-year-old, so I was making notes. Thank you so much. It's a few questions that have come in from some of the people listening, so we'll crack on with it.
Sure.
So the first one, Chetna, is parenting doesn't come with a manual, quoting Dr. Kang herself. So why don't we just be natural and learn on the job? Is there any harm with this conscious, unconscious modeling?
To be honest, most of us do learn a lot of things on the job, but I was speaking earlier about our past impressions, how we were raised. And, you know, our mind has got, you know, we only are aware of about 10% of what's going on in our mind. Okay, what's going on for us internally. A lot of what we've experienced in the past is sitting in our subconscious and unconscious, especially our earlier experiences, especially our early life experiences. So this is why I was doing the exercise about think about something that you find you do automatically that's positive for your family and something that you struggle with to do with your family. It's likely that you probably had an early life experience which set that up. So I guess the vulnerability with the see how it goes and just be natural is that we've all got such a mixed bag of early life experiences of childhoods that if we just rely on that, we don't know what our mind's going to spew up, you know, at any one moment. It might spew up something which is really helpful. It might spew up something which is really unhelpful. So actually, being more conscious about our parenting, it allows us and it empowers us to build on the strengths we have, but to transform any gaps that might be there. You know, it's if I look at the way I parent, a lot of the way I parent came from my mum and from my dad. It just did. I get more and more aware of that as both the good and the bad. But they can both be celebrated, right? Even my difficult experiences can be celebrated because they led to a strength in me. So yes, we should be natural. We don't want to be artificial. But I think what we can do is combine the two. If we combine conscious parenting with being natural, it means we're natural about where we're at, but we're conscious about where we're going, which is why being, you know, purposeful, having shared purpose and shared experience is so important.
That's wonderful. I like that very much. Thank you very much. Another question, Chetna, can you explain why we take our closest loved ones, for example, our family, for granted and treat those closest to us the worst? Why are we conditioned like this? It's a phenomenon that affects all of us. And how, is there some sort of tips you can give on how we can unwire that?
Sure. Why do we do it? Why does familiarity breed lack of gratitude and contempt? You know, it's the why is a can of worms. It's a huge topic. Why that happens? Some of it is conditioning. Some of it is practice. You know, we often hear about this practice of daily gratitude. If we have a habit of that, we are less likely to become over-familiar and take for granted. But I think one of the dangers of when we become over-familiar or take people for granted is that the same social etiquette that we have with others. Okay, taking someone for granted or being over-familiar means we kind of lose respect for them. But when we're outside, we seem to have respect for other people. Sometimes that respect is genuine, that actually we actually hold them in high regard. Sometimes that respect is generated by we're looking to see what we can get out of the situation. We don't want to lose a job or be seen to, you know, to be a bad person or an unkind person. So we're more respectful. We want to give our best face. At home, our families love us, right? They tolerate us. They love us despite our faults. Isn't that what we all look for in our family? The person you've married, the person you've decided to share your life with, is the person that you hope and you chose because they saw you. They saw your flaws, they saw your beauty, and they accepted all of you, right? But what ends up happening is, especially in the microcosm of a family, is when we don't have this revisiting of respect and appreciation for each other. This is where okay, I'm not going to have any social etiquette here, any respect here. Whatever comes out of my mouth and in my mind, I'm just going to spew it out because they're going to tolerate it anyway. Okay, sometimes though, we also take out the worst side of us on our family members because perhaps we're angry at them. I know good relationships, and this is across the board, whether it's conjugal, friendships, spiritual relationships, work relationships, need regular forgiveness. Okay, because forgiveness is really about, combining the power of compassion and understanding, but with the bravery, humility, and actually positive, loving action to see that the right thing is done.
Could you just say that mantra again?
So forgiveness is about bringing together humility and, compassion and understanding for where the other person is coming from, but also having and being brave and humble with loving determination to see that the right action is also, happening. Because forgiveness isn't just about making the peace. Forgiveness is about, really letting go of this idea that I'm waiting to see you punished. Isn't it in our households, we sometimes just say things to aggravate the other person?
Yeah.
Right? Looking for a reaction. When we're looking for a reaction, often it means I'm looking for a connection with you, right? Don't we see that in our kids? Sometimes when our kids are being brattish, actually what they're looking for is a connection, and maybe they're getting used to that. The only time I seem to get a reaction from my parent is when I'm acting out. Right? So there's a lot, it's complex, there's a lot of things here, but regular practice of forgiveness really helps daily, on a daily basis, letting go of the small stuff, but at the same time taking action to address it, allows us to have a healthy, open, communicative relationship with each other, where we are able to communicate our hurts and our expectations, but at the same time, be able to do that in a way which doesn't offend the other person and also doesn't hurt us, because we're expecting the other person to read our mind.
Yeah, exactly. Because we just take them for granted.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. I love that formula there. I'm going to post it on my wall. I seem to have lost you. No, there you are. Okay.
I'm here.
Someone's asked a very nice question. How can I give all my love to my family without feeling exhausted?
Where's your love coming from? Okay, love is not just an emotional feeling. Love is also action. Love is also a mindset. Love can sometimes be tough. Okay, love means putting the other person first. But where are we getting our nourishment from? Because that nourishment needs to be consistent, and it needs to run deeper than just external adjustments. It needs to run deeper than just satisfying activities and thoughts. I think one of the things we have at Avanti School Trust is kind of really looking at people as a whole person, body, mind, essence. So where's our essence being nourished? We are by nature loving and loved. We are by nature embodiments of compassion and tolerance and forgiveness. But are we nourishing that in ourselves? And how are we doing that? This is where people's, where our own activities really can have a profound effect on not just shifting our consciousness, but the people around us. So it is impossible for us to not be exhausted when loving others if we're not topping up our own reservoirs of love. So that means being connected to the reservoir of love, to the universal pool.
Is this tying with the word compassion fatigue?
Yes, compassion fatigue, yeah. Compassion, but the thing is, love, compassion, kindness, there is a physiological element to that. There is a social element to those things. There is an emotional element to those things. There's a psychological element and aspect to those things, but there's also spiritual. When I say we are the embodiment of these things, that means it comes from deep within us. But are we nourishing that side of us? And is it balanced? Because sometimes we can rush to nourish the essence and then neglect the other relationships in our life. right? And the other aspects of wellness and staying happy and healthy. On the other hand, we may find that we're focusing so much on psychological and physiological wellness, or so much on relationships that we're neglecting our physical health, or so much on those things that we've neglected our spiritual health. So I know this isn't to say we should be being perfect in every way, but it needs balance. And we'll find that wherever we're neglecting something, it will catch us up, and we will feel bereft in that area at some point in our life. You know, there'll be some of us who have paid so much attention to perhaps our careers or our romantic relationships that we've neglected other parts of our family, or we've neglected our spiritual life. That will come back at some point. Others, we put a lot into our spiritual practices, and maybe we've neglected our personal relationships, maybe our friendships, maybe our children. And then that comes back to, so you know, this is like, I sometimes think of life as cooking in a kitchen. An expert cook has many dishes across their hob, right? But they're very careful to kind of time things and do things in such a way that, you know, at any given point, while you're cooking your meal, some things just need to simmer, right? Because you've already done the legwork there. Other things need to be brought to the front hob and need spices added, need a bit of stirring. So we should look at ourselves and our life like this as a 360-degree approach.
Great, thank you very much. That's a brilliant answer. We have another question from YouTube. How do we reduce our expectations from our kids, especially regarding grades and educational outcomes?
Understand your child as an individual. That's so important. They will appreciate you for it later. You know, I think I've had many people say that they had a bad relationship with their parents when they were growing up, and it's better as they got older. Maybe it took their parents a really long time to let go of them and allow them to be individuals. Maybe those kids had to take a few years away from their parents to be able to become individuals. But if we can already do that from the start, you know, it's very easy as parents to get blindsided by our egos and try and fulfill our own desires through our children. So I think, you know, when we're looking at goals for our children, hopes and expectations for our children, where is our child in all of that? Now, some of this is about understanding the strengths and vulnerabilities of the child. Some of this is about understanding what's best for the child overall. And some of this is also really checking and seeing, okay, how much of this is my ego? How much of this is my fear of what other people will say to me about unfulfilled, you know, desires or expectations that I had? Because, you know, you may very well have been sent somebody into your family. That child's come to you to test you.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So everything happens for a reason, but everything happens for us, for us to grow, be better, be happy, feel loved, be connected. Brilliant.
I mean, if only it's a practice to think that way, to think that we have to learn a lesson and it's for our benefit, and not that this rascal or this monkey is tearing us
it's
down.
Trying to just give me a hard time, right? No, but this is the way reading is so important. You know, what we read and what we hear has a huge impact on how our mind and intelligence drive our decision making. You know, if we read and hear uplifting things, it helps us to keep that mindset.
This is a question I had later for you, but what books, what would you say are the 3 best books that a parent can go to as a resource to get a well-rounded understanding of the research out there?
Do you know what? I know this might sound like a cop-out, but it really genuinely isn't. I don't recommend individual books to people generally, because I've read so many different books over the years, both related to, you know, my profession, but spiritually, that I actually find secular books or books that are specifically about a particular topic, people's appetite for it and what suits them is very varied. Okay, it depends a lot on our communication style, what we find useful, because often when self-help books are written, they're written through the prism and view of the individual writing it. And what I find, on the other hand, with spiritual books is that with spiritual books, they are written keeping everybody in mind. And so actually, to be honest, lots of people ask me, where do I get my understanding of the mind? And, how do I bring in these other dimensions into understanding the mind when they've not heard these things in other places before, especially in the profession that I do? And I have to say, there's a lot of wisdom there in sacred texts about how the mind, how relationships, how those aspects of our life work. And, it fundamentally boils down to whether I'm looking at parenting manuals, whether I'm looking at self-development books or spiritual guidance, it ultimately boils down to really, how do we love? How do we put others first? Yeah. And how do we put our egos aside and develop those deeper aspects of ourselves? Because if we're coming from that bedrock, then all the different tools, whether the tools are using a family meeting, whether the tool's using a timeout, whether the tool is, going out for fun activities, the tools are just tools. What bedrock are those tools being used on? I think that has probably a more profound impact than anything else. Because if we're not coming from a selfless place, then, or if we're not trying to come from a selfless place and a loving place, then even a family meeting won't work so well.
I was watching a documentary about former presidents. So it was George Bush and Bill Clinton. And the interviewer asked both of them, what does it take to become a president? And they gave their answers in terms of qualities, humility, compassion, etc. Then he asked Bill Clinton. He said, you were a leader in your youth at school, college, university, state level government, and then you became the prime minister. What is it that allowed you to be successful through the whole journey? He said, communication. He said, in his day, there was no TV, no phones. So he had to just live his whole life. If a human being was there, you talk to them and the conversation goes on and on. Can you give some tips on how we can improve our communication skills at home, where the tendency is to think, okay, I'm no longer on stage, i.e. at work or with friends. So there's this tendency to be complacent and we just go on our phone while we're playing with the kids, we'll go on our phone, or everything seems to be a bit absent-minded when we're at home, and how we can...
I think you've answered your own question there, because you've highlighted the number one distraction. The example you gave of Bill Clinton and these presidents, that actually they communicated. Why did they communicate? Or what was there space to communicate? Of course there was, because it's much easier to switch off the TV when there's only 4 channels, right? It's much easier to get off the phone if all you do is speak on it.
Yeah.
But if your phone is your TV and your office and your perhaps your dating site or your coffee shop, well, like, it's become for everybody now, right? Everybody's working, meeting up with friends, educating, doing everything online, entertaining, everything online, right? So how do we be more present? That's really essentially what healthy communication comes down to. Aside from being selfless, loving, and kind, it comes down to being present. And it's very difficult to be present if we are busy being busy. Okay, so I would say on a practical level, I've introduced this idea of family meetings really to bring in where we don't have opportunities naturally, like we did perhaps back in the day. There were more opportunities naturally to communicate and be present, right? Playing outside, doing sports, chatting to each other, because there was nothing else distracting you. Where we don't have that now, we have to then create that. We have to be conscious about creating that. So family meetings are once a week thing. You can build that into the day. Easy ways to build it into the day. And this also helps us to detox from technology as well. Is have a set time as a family in the morning where nobody goes on their technology. Have a set time in the evening where nobody goes on their technology after. This will help your sleep. It'll help your communication. It will set an example to the kids. It will teach all of us in the household self-control and discipline, because there's only so much time that our minds can be on a screen, distracted by many different stimuli at the same time, without it affecting our mental well-being, without affecting our attention span. And we get worse and worse at just being present in community. So being present first of all, is a good tip. So practice that, create opportunities for you to be present, and find healthy ways to communicate with each other through active listening. Because if we listen, you know, the first thing I was taught in my job is listen. That is the first skill that we're not taught so much, you know, speak, explain things eloquently, learn the diagnostic codes. The first thing as a doctor we do is we learn how to listen. And because when you listen to someone, within 60 seconds, the first 60 seconds of any meeting, people have expressed exactly what's most important to them. When we don't listen, all we have is what's most important to me.
Yeah, that's very true.
So make space and time, be present, and listen actively. Those are my 3 tips.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Earlier you said about having self-control, and the questions come in. Any advice for setting boundaries for kids, especially when they feel they should be governed by the same boundaries that apply to us parents, i.e. phone time, eating habits, sleeping habits and stuff? I know I get it a lot. I'm, you know, in the evening to unwind, I might watch Netflix, and then my son says, well, you get to watch it at nighttime, I get to watch it in the daytime. So they try to maneuver things around so that they're governed by the same boundaries, but they don't understand, or maybe we're mis-explaining it, that they have.
Okay, let me answer your question with a question first. When you're at work, I'm sure you have a boss there or somebody who's senior. I'm sure their boundaries are different. What allows you to respect their boundaries and not expect you to have the same ones?
Understanding their authority.
And what makes you helps you to understand the authority?
Respect.
Because you got it. Sometimes it boils down to because you got it, right? Okay, so there's 2 things here. First of all, parenting is hard work. Selfless means selfless. Depending on the age of our kid, very small children observe. They learn through observation. So you can explain, unless your child is very emotionally intelligent, you can explain it all you want to them. Oh, I'm an adult. You're a child. It's me like, no, we're the same. Whatever you do, I'm going to do, right? Okay, in their mind, that's all there is. There isn't all this fancy, you know, hierarchy or anything. I love you, you love me. Why don't you do the same thing? If this is good for me, why isn't it good for you? And often what's good for our kids is good for us. You know, I was giving a sleep seminar a couple of weeks back, and I was saying, you know, we give our kids the luxury and, you know, the support of a good sleep routine. We don't give ourselves that. Why? So actually, first of all, ask yourself, is what I'm expecting of my child actually good for me too? Okay. And is my child showing me something that I should actually be doing this? Then there's other things which really aren't appropriate, you know, for kids. For example, you might only need 7 hours sleep and your child needs to sleep 12 hours. You can try and explain that. But, you know, depending on a child's age and as they grow, you need to use different tactics. But with small children, they respect and adhere to boundaries based on love. Okay. As children get older, they go through this phase between 6 and 12 where they need boundaries based on authority. And that authority needs to be a combination of respect and love. But then after 12, especially in the teen years and tween years, especially kids today, you know, with the current climate being so different, it's a difficult age from 12 to 18 because on the one hand, they want to hold on to the safety of parents very closely. They need that love and nourishment. At the same time, they're developing their independence and their own sense of self-identity. So they need to feel like they've earned respect, like we've earned their respect because they're understood. So again, and their needs may be aligning more with ours because they're becoming an adult and yet they still have children. So it's more about how do we get children to accept boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they do it. It starts from an early age. If they love us and respect us and appreciate the boundaries from a young age, then as the boundaries are put in later on, then it's just automatic that they accept it, just like you do with your boss. It's just automatic. You know, the question, you struggle to respond to why you accept, but you just do because they respect you, you respect them, right? So you can't use the same parenting dialogue that we did with a 4-year-old as you do with a 12-year-old. I've seen that. I've seen that with my relationship with my daughter. It's nuts. The same stuff just doesn't work. You know, and it's great because it helps us to grow.
That example you gave of the boss that dumbfounded me a few minutes ago, because it was set from the outset, it's now very easy for it to be maintained. And I think with our parenting, we can't really chop and change. We have to kind of keep growing on the momentum and getting it early. This
I was just going to say, just to add to that, one thing about boundaries is please follow through. Please follow through. If you say you're going to give your child a reward, give them the reward. If you say you're going to give your child a punishment, give them a punishment. The thing is, if you go back and forwards with I've met parents who've said, oh yeah, I just tell them I'm going to give them sweets and then I don't give it to them. I said, yeah, but then in their mind, that means that if they do something, you don't follow through. As they get older, they'll just realize, well, my parents don't follow through on anything that they say, and it breaks trust. But if your child knows that every time my mum says or my dad says that this is the consequence of my action, and the consequence plays out, whether it's a good or negative one, whether it's for growth or whether it's reward, what that develops is trust. Trust in other human beings, trust in life, and trust in themselves, and trust in that relationship. So please follow through. So don't say things that you don't mean.
Very, very sound advice. We'll go into our last question now. What advice would you offer to parents in relation to reassuring their children about returning to school? Because there's lots of conversations going on the forums at the moment of whether they should or not.
I think with children, I think just like with us, I think it's important to get the information about the current climate correct, okay? And not get swayed by people who are being too relaxed about it, or people who are too frightened. Just get the facts. We are dealing with a pandemic. We are dealing with a virus. The virus inherently on its own, how much harm it causes is relative. Okay, and so children are largely safe. At some point, most people are going to be exposed to it. All we're doing as a society, as a community, as a planet, is actually we're working as a team to not just bring things in control and keep an environment where we're able to manage and offer the services that everybody needs, depending on to what degree they are affected by the virus, but also in such a way that actually we can stop and take stock of how things are going to improve in our lives as individuals, as families, and as communities after this. Children respond, and we all respond much better to focusing on the positive outcomes and the positivity behind what's going on, rather than framing it in a, this is something to be scared of. Facts do that. Facts are a really good way of neutralizing a situation, So I would say seek to neutralize with information and then make it a positive. Now, unfortunately and sadly, this is for some families, there are going to be difficulties and challenges, but this is where good communication is really helpful, and family wellness comes into its own, is that the challenges are framed and seen as opportunities, are seen as something which helps us, even if it makes us sad. There's a beauty in all of our emotions. They're there for a reason. But anyway, I wish everybody well, and I wish you very, very well in your journey to family wellness. And I hope you all stay safe and happy through the COVID pandemic and beyond. Family wellness goes beyond COVID. It's just a little chapter in our lives, right? It will be behind us soon. Just to let you know, I am doing something with Nightingale Hospital tomorrow, which focuses much more on the mental health side. And that's on my Instagram and Facebook if you want to register for that. But thank you so much for having me, Kush.
Thank you very, very much, Chetna. It's been a pleasure. My hands are hurting from scribbling down whilst also trying to keep an eye on everything. I will definitely need to watch this again and make notes better with my wife. Thank you very much. I've personally had the pleasure of knowing you for many years. I watched your recent talk in April on sleep, and that's when I stopped doing my Netflix binges. I started to sleep better because what was that hormone that comes out at nighttime?
Melatonin.
Melatonin. I wanted some of that. I needed some of that. So thank you very much. I was going to say, just
Kushi, the family meeting, if it's useful for people, I can put a template, I can share a template for people who've watched the presentation or might be coming back afterwards, and you can adjust it however you want.
Yeah, that will be perfect. And we can send that out through all the groups that we've promoted this through. So that will be fantastic. So this is just the beginning of two things. Our journey of family wellness being series for Avanti schools. but also it's the beginning of your connection with Dr. Chetna Kang. You can see here on the screen. Please follow her. I've been following her for a while now. She's got amazing seminars, good quotes, and she even gives some lovely pictures of her cooking that she does with her daughter. So make sure you check it out. She's got a heart of gold. She's got a brain full of knowledge and wisdom, and she wants to share it. Follow her and share it with other people. Everyone needs it. One of her quotes on her page is that depression is invisible. It affects anyone and everyone. So we have to be aware that our body may be healthy, but are we well in terms of our being? So she's an amazing resource. Please take advantage. Everything's free, but there's so much wisdom there. So please take a screenshot of this and follow her. And she's doing stuff most days and lots of lives on Instagram. So you can ask your ongoing questions to her. Regarding Avanti Nights, our next event is on Thursday, the 4th of June, same time via YouTube. What does your gut feel? So we have an Ayurvedic therapist, Niti Shet. She'll be logging on and she'll be talking to us about the ancient science of Ayurveda and how it can affect us modern, and how she's definitely going to make it practical, because I know we second generation Indians and many people that are watching there, we may not have all the tips and tricks from the ladies from the East, but we can try and learn the science, and she'll give some tips. And she also has on social media pages where you can follow up with her. So please make a note of that. And finally, Avanti Schools Trust, they have many schools. It's a group of schools across the UK that are focused on educational excellence, character formation, and spiritual insight. Avanti exists to help each person become a well-rounded human being through intellectual, personal, and spiritual growth, and so make the world a better place. So if you want to find out more about Avanti, if you're interested in thinking about getting your kids into Avanti schools in the future, then check out www.avanti.org.uk. That's avanti.org.uk, and we'll put that at the end of the YouTube chat pinned. So from me, Kush, from Dr. Kang, we thank you very much for your kind attention. Keep safe, be positive,